Good evening and welcome everyone to Vanquish Bank's online webinar, which we are really pleased to be running this year as part of Leeds Digital Festival. What does it mean to be a 10x developer and how do I become one? In a moment, we're going to hear from our speaker, but before we do, just some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please fire them over via the chat box and we will answer these at the end of the session. We are recording, so this will be shared with anyone that's registered by email after, so you can watch again as you wish. We hope you enjoy the talk, and I'm now going to hand over to Mark Gosser, Principal Software Engineer at Vanquish, to begin the session. Mark, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Adele. So welcome to our talk. Well done for making it to 6 p.m. on a Monday rather. So our talk today is about what does it mean to be a 10x developer and how do I become one? So first of all, let's start with a little story about our friend Fred. So Fred is here 6 p.m. on a Monday in a different universe where there is no talk about 10x developers, because obviously he would be at that talk. So he's looking at the sprint board, he's looking at all the tasks he's got to do, and he's just thinking, wow, if only I could work, if only I could work 10 times the speed. So then he comes across this comment from Techopedia. So what is a 10x developer? So it's any individual or a developer who can be as productive as 10 others in their field. Now, if you think about that, that's imagine a room of 10 people, and imagine that you could have just one person doing the work of those 10 people. So it's quite a tall ask. So do 10x developers exist? Well, probably, maybe. Do I say that I'm a 10x developer? I don't think so, but I've definitely done a bit of reading around on the topic and definitely have some good pointers for you. Cool. So who am I? I'm Mark. I'm a principal software engineer in the loans department at Vanquish. I'm mainly focused on .NET, but do a few other things like automation testing, PowerShell, Terraform, designing, breaking, fixing Azure infrastructure. Usually a little more breaking than fixing, but that's me. So I work at Vanquish. So who's Vanquish Bank? So Vanquish Bank it's part of the Provident Financial Group, and we're focused mostly on providing credit to customers through credit cards and loans. And our market is the subprime market. So these are the customers who maybe couldn't get credit from other mainstream credit providers. So we've got offices in London, Bradford, and Chatham. If you're wondering about the address of the London office, well, it's that big walkie-talkie building somewhere in the city of London. So the tech that we work with is mostly .NET, Azure Cloud Technologies, Azure DevOps. We've got Terraform, we've got Kubernetes, we've got a bit of serverless around. So definitely lots of fun things that we get up to. So what are we going to talk about today? So the 10x developer probably has a lot of tips and tricks up their sleeve on how they can work so much faster. So I've divided the talk up into 3 parts. The first part is productivity tips. Then we're going to look at tons of code, and that would be tips for working with code. And then we'll look at how do we get better, because being a developer is always about continuous self-improvement. So productivity tips. So number 1, so remove distractions. So one thing that we find is that when we're tired, we tend to be distracted more. So sleep is extremely important. So working with code is quite intellectually challenging. So you may forget this if you've been writing code for a few years, but I'm sure when most of us started out writing code, it was not straightforward. So sleep is extremely important for the brain, for example. So during the day, the brain is working pretty hard. It's making a lot of waste products during the day. And during the sleep is when our body does its maintenance. So that's when we would clear out those waste products so our brain can work effectively the next day. It's also extremely important for storing memories and just general background processing. So other simple things that we would try not to allow to distract us are food and drink. So if we're hungry all the time or we're thirsty all the time, we're not going to be thinking about, how do I structure this code properly? What we're thinking about is probably a Big Mac or something. Because his laptop is too low. So actually there's a good thing on the NHS website, which is showing us how to set up our work environment. So it will explain how, how high your monitor should be and how high your chair should be, your angles of your elbows and your hips and knees, etc. So that's a good one to check out. So the next one is a bit obvious. So avoid anything that beeps or flashes. So this poor guy is probably trying to focus. He's got email and Teams popping up all the time. He might have his phone next to him, which is now just about everything wants to alert you. And another thing could be that it's actually yourself that's distracting you. So one thing that is quite helpful is if you're working on something and you've got a thought that comes up and you could run away with that thought, what you could do is have an idea notebook. So you just, when you have the thought, put it in the notebook and store it for later on when you have a break or something, or store it for later. So that's productivity tip number 1 on removing distractions. So our second one. Okay, so this is be intentional. So a lot of times we're quite busy. We're going from day to day. We've got loads of tasks. And there's a concept of being proactive. And so what we could do is be proactive by setting our goals the day before, ideally, or at least in the morning, first thing. So this way we decide how our day goes rather than our external factors decide how our day goes. So what we need to do is we just schedule time for what's important, look at our top priorities, etc. And you might find that actually we have a lot of tasks relating to the same code repository or the same set of documentation, or we might need to talk to the same person about 3 different topics. So if we know these things up front, we can batch up our tasks, and that would save us a bit of time, but also reduces the context switching that is involved with that. So you might wonder why there is a giant frog on the screen. So there is a concept of eat that frog. Now this is a book that was written, and it's quite a well-known concept. But if you've not heard of it, it's basically where you schedule your most difficult task, the task where you don't really want to do it, not today, not tomorrow, not ever really. So if you schedule that task for the first thing in the morning when you have the most energy and you get a little bit of the task done, that's like eating a frog in the morning, because that's quite a difficult thing to do. So you find that if you do that hard task in the morning, it gives you a bit of, a sense of achievement that you've done the hardest thing, and now the rest of the day should be plain sailing. So it should be. So our third productivity tip is watch your task count. So this might be known as work in progress. So this would be if you're picking up tasks off a sprint board or of some other task system. So if you find that you're picking up lots of tasks and you can't focus, then this might be something for you. So I definitely find that if I've got too many tasks on, nothing gets done. I complete I've completed most of them to 50 or 60%, and then the next day I carry on going. So I find that multitasking with code is quite tricky. So if you've tried to code through a meeting, you'll find that that's quite hard. So one thing you can do is try and reduce the amount of multitasking, or even eliminate it completely. And I've put here task switching, and we need to keep this to a minimum as well. Cool. So productivity tip number 4. Okay, so flow. So this is a great term that's thrown around quite a bit. So flow is essentially a state where everything just seems to work. Your brain is engaged, the code is getting written somehow. You're concentrating, everything's just coming to you while you're working. So you find yourself quite productive. And so can we just get into a flow routine? Probably can, yes. So there's a concept called the Pomodoro technique. So it's called Pomodoro because it's a concept where you set a timer for 20 minutes or so. And they say that that timer should be one of those cooking timers that's shaped like a tomato, hence Pomodoro. So what you can do is you can set up a routine that gets you into this state of flow. So it could be that you take a moment, you look at the sprint board or your task list, and you choose just one task. And what you can do then, you set a timer for 20 minutes. And maybe you want a tea as well, quickly get a tea. And in that 20 minutes, you probably want to put your headphones on, listen to some focus music or some calming music, and you reduce distractions. So probably you put your phone somewhere else in another room, or and you set Teams to focus mode. So now for 20 minutes, all you do is focus on that one task. And so that's the concept of Pomodoro technique, with a little bit added to try and get you into that routine to get into a flow state. And you'll find that when you keep doing this routine, you'll find it easier to get into that state of flow. Great. So our 5th tip is about saving time. So it might sound pretty, pretty self-explanatory, but how do we save time? There's a lot happening during the day. So one thing you can try is maybe put meetings next to each other, so you don't have 30-minute gaps between meetings, because when you're writing code, a 30-minute gap means that you'll take 15 minutes to work out what the task is that you need to do, and then probably another 10 minutes to work out how to do it. And then you'll start doing it, and then it's time for the next meeting. So you're thinking about the next meeting instead of actually writing the code. So one thing that you can try is try batch meetings up. So put them close to each other. Or you might want to try and maybe reduce the meetings. So rather than using the default of Outlook, which is 30 minutes, maybe see if you can deliberately set that to 15 minutes. And there's the next point about the maker's schedule versus the manager's schedule. So the maker's schedule is, if you think of maybe a watchmaker, these people, they need to concentrate. They've got many small moving parts, and you get the impression that they need to focus for a few hours to make the watch. It's not very easy for them to leave that watch because they're leaving many small parts just on the desk. So anything can happen there. So they need a few hours of peace and quiet to be able to do that. Whereas you think of maybe a watchmaker manager. So he's probably got 20 watchmakers that he looks after, and he probably needs to talk to maybe 10 of them each day. So he's probably got 30-minute meetings with each one of them, and probably not much time to do other things, because he needs to resolve issues and try and increase the productivity of the team. So for us as developers, and for non-technical people, it's a very good thing to know what the difference is between a maker's schedule and a manager's schedule. So another thing we can do is to try and document instead of meet. So when you have a lot of meetings, especially with knowledge transfer, so your team may have built a new service, and now you've got a number of other teams that need to consume the output of that service. So what could happen in option 1 is that each team would book a meeting with you, and they'll take half an hour to an hour of your time and probably come back a week later with a few more questions. Or if you go with option 2, you can maybe document all the outputs of the system, document what the system does, all the logic. And instead of some of the meetings, you might be able to point people at documentation. You probably have a few meetings for questions on the documentation. In that case, maybe you can try and update the documentation, check the questions are answered, and maybe have a shorter meeting. So the next thing I've put up here is don't code tired. So I don't know if you've had that scenario where you're looking at some code that you're looking at some code in the morning and you think, wow, that's pretty bad code. And you take a look at who's written it and you see your name all over it. And then you see the time was 11 o'clock at night the night before. And that's probably where you want to refactor, probably want to rewrite parts of it. So, so coding tired means it's probably more likely we have some rework to do. So that might be something you want to minimize. The last thing is around automating yourself. So I've got a few little examples of that. But what you can find is that when you are doing pretty basic tasks, or when you've got a pretty boring task, what you might do is think about automating it. Because if it's boring, then it's probably something that's very straightforward. And if it's straightforward, you can write out the steps. And if you can write out the steps, you can probably automate it. Cool. So I see a question here. Do you think 10x developing can work in any language? So, yes, I think being a developer can work with any language. So here, what we can do is you'll be able to apply these tips to whatever language you work in. But actually, a lot of these productivity tips are not development specific, and it could well be that actually this can work for other roles. Okay, so productivity tip number 6, get some downtime. So if you've ever read about the subconscious mind, so you'll find that sometimes when you're stuck on a problem, you might work on it for the morning and you'll go for a walk at lunch. And then after lunch, or even during lunch, the solution just comes to you while you're just walking around listening to music or chatting to your colleagues or whatever. So that's the subconscious mind. It's always processing things in the background, and it can work a lot faster than the conscious mind. So sometimes it's a better idea to, when we're stuck, to just step away for a bit, maybe do another task, or have a few minutes break, go get a coffee or something. So downtime is useful for that, but also we're not quite machines, although some of us might want to be or claim to be. So downtime is very important. The last thing we want to do is to burn out. So we're always encouraging people to take up their annual leave properly and space it out a bit. And I think when we're on holiday or when we're not working, sometimes we just need to do anything but working. So even though we like our jobs, we still need a break. Great. Okay, so productivity tip number 7. So this is our last one. So procrastination. I do like this quote about tomorrow, that mystical land where everything gets achieved. So what's useful to know about procrastination is that there are some quite common causes for it. And so when we know the causes of procrastination, we can then start trying to eliminate them. So one thing we have is we might procrastinate if we're under challenged or bored. And that's when we all need a bit of a challenge. So if we're not challenged, we're less likely to feel enthusiastic about that task. But these sort of tasks are quite interesting sometimes. If you've got a very boring task, it's a lot more challenging if you automate it. It's going to take a bit more time, but at least the next time you have to do it, you don't actually have to do it. So maybe you can add a little twist to it, try and figure out how to do it faster at the same level of quality, or try and figure out how to automate it. Another thing is when we're tired. Okay, so when we're tired, our minds wander a bit, we daydream. And like I was talking about sleep earlier, so sleep is a very important thing we can add into our schedule if we don't have it already. Okay, another thing is the fear of failure. So this is an interesting one. It's when you don't really want to pick up a task because you know that that task is something that's going to be really hard and you're just going to fail a few times. So with fear of failure, so if we feel like we're going to be stuck, then we can look at it a different way. So if it's going to be hard, we will learn something. If we'll fail a few times, we'll certainly learn something. And there's a great quote from Thomas Edison. So when he was trying to figure out how do you create a light bulb, I think his quote was that he failed 1,000 times, but he didn't really fail. He was saying that he learned 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb. And so all this knowledge enabled him to make a light bulb at some point. So next one is fear of success. So the fear of success is when you fear completing all of your work, or you fear succeeding at your chosen goal. So we all like to be busy, and if you've only got one task left on the sprint board or on your task list, it doesn't really look like you're so busy. So one thing definitely at Vanquish, we've got so much happening at the moment, and I certainly know that if I complete that task, there's another 5 tasks behind it. So yeah, so fear of success is an interesting one. So this last question on how do we know if we're procrastinating? Okay, so I did a little experiment on myself. So what I did was I made a small application which tracks the active window on my computer. And what I found was I spent a lot longer than I thought looking at my task list. So I thought to myself, why am I looking at my task list? Because just staring at the tasks is not really very helpful. Maybe I'm trying to close my tasks by staring at them. And I could tell you that you can't close tasks by staring at them. But if you stare long enough, you will actually be able to close other people's tasks. And I'm not really sure how that works, but I still haven't managed to close my own tasks by staring at the sprint board. But anyway, after that little experiment, I now know that I should close the sprint board, make sure that it's not open in any of my browser tabs. So maybe there's some experiments you can do as well. Okay, so section 2, well done for making it this far. So tips for working with code. Okay, so if you've ever been at that point where maybe you've picked up a task, you need to modify maybe 10 files or 15 files. You don't need to do much change to each one, but you definitely need to modify that number of files. So you do your work and everything is working, your unit tests are passing, everything is fine. And then you just look at that namespace and you think, I really want to rename the namespace. So you go and rename the namespace. And then suddenly the code doesn't build. And you can't undo because you've modified so many files, you don't know which ones to undo. And changing a namespace changes so many files. So now you've got a bit of a problem. You've now got 40 changed files and you haven't got a checkpoint. So that's where the small regular commits come in. So if you do regular commits, so you do a very small change, make sure it works. Maybe you have a few unit tests for it that also passed, and then you commit it. Now you've got a clear working environment. So the next thing we need to do is make sure that our unit tests are checked regularly. So one thing you want to avoid is probably writing absolutely tons of code and then finding actually you broke a unit test at the beginning and now you'll never be able to get the code to pass the unit test. So again, this leads on to short-lived feature branches. So if you've ever held on to a feature branch for a week, or actually 2 weeks, which I have shamelessly done, but actually that was out of my control, I promise. When you come to merge it, that's when you'll feel a lot of struggle and pain, where you've got the dreaded merge conflict, or maybe 10 of them. So short-lived feature branches really make life a lot easier. So we're aiming for maybe a day, if we can do a day, maybe 2 days. But I think things which are much longer, then you'll probably find that many other people have committed code into the main branch. And then when you come to merge a feature branch, it's going to be quite difficult. Another thing that is quite useful is to refactor regularly. So when you refactor regularly, it's a lot easier than writing a lot of code and then coming to refactor, because then you've got a lot of work you may need to undo and redo. But when you refactor regularly, it's a lot easier. And actually that leads us on nicely to just briefly mention test-driven development. So test-driven development, you have a cycle of red-green refactor. So here you would write just the one test, or even just the minimum amount of a test to make it fail, so it goes red. And then you write the minimum amount of application code to make it pass the test. And then that's the green part. And then after that, you'd refactor. And then you'd go on to writing the next test. So you can see the red-green refactor means that actually you're making small regular changes and you're refactoring regularly. So this is one of the advantages of test-driven development. Okay, so let's go and have a look at some code. Okay, so I've got two repositories. So let's look at the first one here. So this is a small Fizzbuzz API. So if I quickly show you the controller. So the controller is essentially accepting a Fizzbuzz input, and all that has is it has a number on it. And then it calls into this Fizzbuzz service, which is injected through the constructor. So if I head into that, so for those who don't know, Fizzbuzz is a little game. It's quite a simple little game, but it helps illustrate what I need to show you. So essentially with Fizzbuzz, what you can do, or what you need to do, is you need to say, if you give it a number, if you give it the number 3, you need it to return fizz. Or if you give it any number divisible by 3, it needs to return fizz. And if you give it a number divisible by 5, it needs to return buzz. And if it's not divisible by 5 or 3, it needs to return the number. But there's another part to it. So if it's divisible by 5 and 3, it needs to return Fizzbuzz. So that's the code that we need to implement. So here we've got, we don't have the code we need here. So what I'll do is, I won't do the test-driven development approach. I'm going to just paste in what I think should go in. And it's something like this. So if it's divisible by 3 and divisible by 5, return Fizzbuzz. And let's say this code is a little more complicated than it is. And I'm not really sure where the code needs to go. So if I quickly run this project, I just want to find out if this is going to work properly. So I've just hit debug, and it should open up a Chrome tab with Swagger. So this gives us a nice simple UI to try out our service. So if I pass in the number 15, because that's divisible by 3 and 5, hit execute, I've only got fizz. Okay, so it probably hasn't done what I need it to do. So let's exit out of that. So I could play around, I can move this up and down, and then I would have to debug it each time. So that's a bit tedious. So maybe we'll go with a different approach. So I'll just delete the code that I've just added. And let's try do it a different way. So I'll add a test instead. And just by the way, if you're looking at this piece of code while you're working on this piece of code, maybe this might be something we want to remove. So this is quite a nice descriptive method. So return fizz if divisible by 3, and okay, it's basically someone has written out the user story into a method. Oh, and they even put a nice comment at the end saying, well done for making it this far. Okay, so what's that method doing? Oh, it's got a nice comment to say runs get result. Well, I can see that it runs get result. That's the only line. But this is a quick comment about clean code. So it's got no references. This code isn't really in use. So I would just go away and delete that. But first of all, I'll show you the tests. So I've got a test class for this. So here you've got all the different tests for checking if it's divisible by 3, then return fizz. The same if it's divisible by 5, return buzz. So there's no test for if it's divisible by 3 and 5. So let me quickly paste that in. So now that test is in, so let's see if that passes. So what we want with test-driven development is we want it to fail first. So we need it to go red. So is that going red? Yeah. So that test has failed. All 3 cases of it has failed. So now what you can do is I can add the code that I think we need to pass a test. So if I add it, back in here, I'll see if that passes the test. So we expect this to fail because that's where we added it last time. So that fails. But this cycle is perhaps a bit quicker than debugging, but I think we can make it quicker still. So with Visual Studio and some of the other tools out there, so you can also use NCrunch. So you've got this feature called live unit testing. So you can get to this through the search here, and I've already opened up the live unit testing window here. So here, if I hit the start button, what it's going to do is it's going to hopefully go and check my code each time I finish typing part of it. So whenever I make a change to the code, it's going to run all the tests. So here you can see that there are some failing tests related to this class. And you can go through and go have a look at those. Okay, so it's the 3 tests that I've added, or well, the 1 test I've added with the 3 parts of the 3 inline data that I've added. So maybe what I need to do is move this up. So if I cut that and put it here, is that passing my tests? No, still not passing. So if I put it maybe up here, is that passing my tests? Okay, so it's passing. So now my feedback loop changed from maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds to now just 2 seconds. I didn't really have to do anything. So I'll quickly just clean up the code a bit, remove some of these lines. And now I feel confident that I can delete this. So there's no references to it, can't be used. And if I delete it, it's going to run my unit tests again and hopefully still pass, which it does. So that's an example doing it in the test-driven development approach. But now I've got loads of tests. If I wanted, I can play around with the code a bit. So I can now say, maybe it makes sense for this to go above. So I can put that back there. And it's going to quickly check what I'm doing each time. Or maybe actually, this looks like rather long-winded. This is it's a 24-line method. Maybe I can just refactor and use some of the cool C#9 features. So this is a switch statement in C#9. And here again, yep, it's still passing my tests. So I can now play around with it a bit and organize it how I wish. Maybe I can move this down to the bottom or not. So, okay, we can't do that. So if I wanted to go back to a working state and I don't know what I've done, I just keep pressing Ctrl-Z until all the little lights go green. So it's a fairly simple way of taking your brain out of the equation, just making life easier for yourself, and also pretty quick. So the next thing I'll show you through is some keyboard shortcuts. So using the mouse is all right. It's pretty simple, it's easy, but it's slow. And also you have to keep moving your hands from your keyboard to your mouse. And in the spirit of trying to be faster, it's probably not the first idea someone trying to be a 10x developer would think of. So let's say we've just opened up this project again. So just close all those tabs. And I know I need to do a change to the Fizzbuzz service. So here I can go use my mouse and try and find it here. But if you press Control, comma, you get this go-to window. And in this window, what you can do is just type in the service or the class that you want to find. So if you type in Fizzbuzz service, you'll eventually find the class. But that's a Pascal case. So when you have the first letter of each word capitalized, so that's Pascal case. And Visual Studio can do something quite clever here. So if I go back into here, if I type in just FBS, it will now find Fizzbuzz service. But actually, I realize I want Fizzbuzz controller, so I can just do FBC. And when I hit enter, I'm there in the class. So if I wanted to go into get result, what I can do is I can press Control F12 to go into the implementation of that method. Or if I wanted to go into the interface, I can press F12 and see what that looks like. But then to get back to the controller, you can press Control minus, and that will take you back to where you last were. And then now to go into the implementation, we can go Control F12, and that takes us into here. So here, I may have shown quickly that you can move lines up and down. So to move a line up, you can press Alt up and down, and that will move lines up and down. And if I maybe wanted to comment out a line, you may already know this one. You can Control KC, and to uncomment, Control KU. Okay, so let's say we've got a bit of a messy method. So I'll go back to the controller here. So let's say someone has someone like me has been coding late at night. The code looks something like this. Hello, I'm trying to type that properly. And we've got lots of using statements that we don't need here. And also the using statements, they're not in alphabetical order. It's a bit of a mess, really. So what you can do is there's another neat shortcut, which is Control K D. So press Control K and then press Control D. So if I do that, you find that that doesn't auto format. So it just puts the spacing and the indentation where it should be. So if I just undo that, this a bit of another trick you can do. So if I press Control K E, what that's done is you see that those unused variables have now disappeared. Okay, and the using statement for system is disappeared, and also these are in alphabetical order. And another thing it did was it put that in, it sorted the indentation. So if I undo, that's what it was, and if I do it again, that's what I've got. So that saves a ton of time. So what that's doing is it's actually the code cleanup shortcut. So here you've got different options for code cleanup. So I've chosen profile 1, and what you can do is you can configure this. So for example, here I've got lots of different rules that get applied when I press Control KE. And I think somewhere here you'll find remove unused variables. And we've also got remove unnecessary usings. So this is all very configurable in Visual Studio. So all you have to do is go to, if you type in C# style, so you'll find here lots of different options, and you can configure it as you wish. So it might be that there is one around using the var prefix versus the explicit type. So I prefer var, so I've just set it that way. So actually, if I've got int a is equal to 5, then it would change that int into a var. And also, when you see the little light bulb icon here, so you note that you can press Control dot. So rather than actually clicking on it, you can press Control dot, and then you can select what you need. But I don't need that. I'm just going to get rid of that. Great. So another thing when you might find that you need the mouse is when you need to do a mouse over. So if I want to know a bit more information about get result, I need to mouse over it. But one thing you can do is press Control K and then Control I, and that does a mouse over for you. And then here as well, there is another shortcut to get the inputs or the parameters for that method. So here you can actually press Control Shift Space, and it would give you that summary. And if there were other overloads for that method, you can press up and down arrow as you need. So one thing that I find very helpful is the Windows V option. So if I press Windows V, I can see all the different things that I've been copying and pasting. So if I wanted to paste that in, for example, I can paste that in. And if I, what other things did I need? Maybe I've got a test or something. So basically it's keeping a record of what was in my clipboard. So I can now copy multiple bits of code from various places and paste them in without having to go back and forth. But the cool thing about the Windows clipboard is it works in Windows. So it's not a Visual Studio specific feature. So it's quite handy for anything really, email, Teams, and if you even take a screenshot, that will appear here as well. So it's quite a neat, handy feature. Okay, so I mentioned as well about automating yourself. So one thing I like to try and do is make my life easier. And you should do too, because it makes your life easier. So one of the annoying things is when, or one of the very tedious things is when you need to clone a new project and you're not sure if you've cloned it before. So what you can do is you can go look in your root directory to find out if you've cloned the project. If you haven't, then you'll have to go and find the URL for the project and then clone it. And then after that, you need to switch on to the develop branch and then pull the latest changes, and then you can start your work. So I've got, so we've created a little PowerShell script to do that for us, actually. So if I go start run, and I'll just type in pwsh, so I'm using PowerShell 7. So here, when it eventually opens up, just clear that up a bit. So we've got a new, just some new commands that we've created. So new Git clone. So what that's going to do is it's actually going to do a clone for me from a repository. But if the code is already there on my machine, then it's going to just open the folder in Visual Studio or VS Code as I need. So I could put in here, let me just quickly get the URL that I need. So I'll paste in that URL. So this is our development utilities. So there's no real important code here. It's just some PowerShell scripts. So that's going to try and open in Visual Studio, but I want to open it in VS Code. So I can just tab and I can select VS Code. But new Git clone is actually quite a lot of typing. So actually it shortened it to Git new clone. So just GNC. And if I hit enter on this, what it's going to do, or what it has done already, is if I go back to that window, close that one. So it's figured out that I've already got this on my local machine. So it's opened up that folder instead of cloning it. And it's already switched to the develop branch. And it's done a git pull to pull the latest changes. It's figured out it doesn't have to do anything. And then it's opened VS Code for me. So if I click on the files, I've got my project open. So it just saved me a whole load of clicks. I could have had a really useful thought at that time, or done something else for a few seconds. So it's one of the quick and little wins. So here, let's say we're going to make a minor change. So I'm just looking through the description for it. I think there should really be a full stop there. So I'm just going to add that. And then here as well in VS Code, it's always good to learn the shortcuts. So Control-Shift-P will bring up this menu. You can type in commit, or just COM, or just C, whatever it is. And I'll just type a quick message. So update readme. And I'm going to copy this because I'm going to need that in a bit. But before I do that, this is something that I try to not do, is let me undo this. And first of all, we're just going to make an actual branch. So if you ever committed to develop and then try to push it, that's something that's not going to work. So to make a new branch, okay, I could go and type it in. I might not be on the develop branch. So if I maybe check out to master or main in this case. So if I check out to main, you'll see at the bottom, I've got the main branch. So now I want to make a new feature branch. And here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste it in. I've got another little script. So git new branch, or GNB in this case. So I've put in the task number and the branch name. So I'll just hit enter here. And what it's going to do is, so it's switched me over to develop. It's pulled down the latest develop changes, and it's created a new branch for me. So that's quite helpful. So now what I want to do is just make that change again. So I'll just add a full stop. I'll go commit, say update readme, and copy that out. So now that's created a commit for me. So here, what I need to do is make a pull request. So again, that's quite a very boring process. So to make a pull request, I need to go to Azure DevOps. I need to go select the repository. I need to select my source branch and my target branch. I need to link my task, and I need to set autocomplete to close off the task and to delete the source branch. So that's another thing that we thought we could automate. So if I just type in npr, and that's just new PR. So here I'll just put in whatever comments. And you'll see here that I'm not actually putting in any other information, just putting in a title. So if I hit enter here, so what it's done, I'll just quickly show that. So here we are. Yep. So it's pushed the latest commits. And then it's created a pull request and it's set autocomplete. So where is the URL for the pull request? Well, that's quite helpful because it's actually in my clipboard. So it's already added it to my clipboard. So if I just paste it in here, I'll find that I've got a pull request. So that's my Leeds Digital Festival demo branch. It's already picked up that I've got that task number and it's linked up my task here. And you see that autocomplete is enabled and I can see what it's done. So it's said it's going to do a no fast forward merge. The source branch is going to be deleted and any work items completed. So actually there's nothing I need to do here. What I might do is just double check that it's the change I thought it would be, and it is. And then I can just take that link and send it to one of my unsuspecting colleagues to approve such a tiny change for me. So just some neat little examples on how you can automate yourself. And so we're developers, we automate things for a living, basically. So you can always automate parts of our job to make it easier and faster. So this also works with Visual Studio, and I can quickly show you a little bit of that code. So essentially here, if we look at maybe the easier one, that's new Git branch. So this is essentially checking out develop, pulling the latest changes from that, and then checking out the new feature branch, which we've passed as a parameter here. New Git Clone is a bit more involved. It's basically checking the repository to see if it already exists. And then from here, we've got a bit more information as to what it's doing. So if there is a solution file, so it will just hunt down through the repository to find the solution file. So this is get child item. It's going to get all the files in the folder. So it's just getting anything with solution. And it's looking through all the subfolders too. Excuse me. And so if it finds just one of them, it will open that first one. And so what it will do, it will pass that path to Visual Studio. And here you see it here starting Visual Studio. In this case, it's actually passing the folder path. But if there is a solution file, it will actually open up the solution file for me. So it's just another neat little thing that you can do. And here's the PowerShell commandlet that actually creates a pull request, and this is the part that I was looking for. So here's the API, the Azure REST API for Azure DevOps. So the Azure DevOps REST API for pull requests. So it'll basically create the request, send it over to Azure DevOps, and generate a pull request. So there you go. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you, the last part of the demo, is going to be a bit around debugging. So I've got this little demo app. I'm quickly going to just delete the breakpoints that shouldn't really be there until later on. So it's quite a simple solution, this one. So all it's doing is it's a URL checker. So here we've got a URL repository. And if I go have a look at that, I've got nothing in there just yet. But it's just a very simple, almost hacky bit of code that probably only took a few minutes for this guy to write, whoever he is. So it's just going to go through each one of the URLs, and it's going to do a GET request, and it's just going to check the status code. So if it's a successful status code, i.e. the website is up and responding correctly, then this is going to return true. And then the actual app should write true to the console. So I've got this new little requirement. So I've got a list of URLs that I need to add. So I'll just show you what they look like here. So there's just a whole load of tech websites. And I've been told that I need to check all of these to make sure that they're up. And if any one of these is not up, I need to write false. So let me go to my URL repository, and I'll go paste that in, and we'll start trying to make that into something that compiles. So I could go through each one and just type in HTTPS : I need to put a comma after it. So this is going to take a bit of time, and that's another thing that goes on my radar as something that's just very boring to do. So what you can do is you can try and get them all in line, and with Visual Studio you've got the option of adding multiple cursors. So if I press Alt, Shift, and up, what I can do is I can add multiple cursors. And now I can type on all the lines at the same time. But if I want to go to the end of the line, it's not doing the multiple cursors for me. So now I need to go and put this on each part of the line, on each line, and that's just too slow. So let's find another way of doing it. So actually, if you've got VS Code installed, so unfortunately VS Code has got better multiple cursor support. So I'm just going to open up a new file, and I'm just going to paste this in. So if I just select all and then press Shift Tab, I get it all on all in line. And then it's the same shortcut. So it's Shift, Alt, and up or down. And then here I can just type in HTTPS www. Just 3 W's. And if I hit end, it goes to the end of all of the lines. So you put a quote and a comma. And actually for management.azure.com, there are no wwws. So it's just management.azure.com, and I don't need the last comma. So now I can take this and go and paste it into Visual Studio, and that should still compile. Hopefully I have no errors. No. Okay, so let's quickly run the project and see what it does. So this is good fun on live demos, obviously. Hopefully we'll see what it does actually. So, okay, so it's come back as false. So why has it come back as false? So one of them is not working. So which one is it? That's the question. So I could put a breakpoint here maybe, and I'll just hit F5. I don't have to click the run to debug. I'll just hit F5 to start the debug. So it's come here and it's hit that breakpoint. It's now on TechCrunch, and I can see status code is okay. Okay, fine. So I'll just hit F10 until we get back there. So that's also quite slow. So now we're on Gizmodo, that's also true. So rather than hitting F10 all the time, so we see a lot of people do this. So if you hit F5, it will just go back to the breakpoint. So it quickly went through them all. So again, TechHive is true, and I'm having to press the same button over and over. It's just going through. This isn't really much fun. So maybe there's an easier way of doing it, a quicker way of doing it. So if only I can get it to stop whenever the success status code is false. So I can do this actually. So on this breakpoint, you've got this gear icon. And in here, you can actually set conditions. So if I change this, I want when I want to put in a statement here. So when that statement is true, then it's going to stop at this breakpoint. So basically what I need is response.isSuccess status code. So if the status code is false, then this statement becomes true and it meets this condition. And one thing you need to remember is to untick this box so it doesn't continue going through the breakpoint. So this means it should hopefully stop there. So if I now run this, yes, I could have hit F5. So it's going to cycle through all the different websites and check if they're up. And I've hit the breakpoint here. So now I can see, okay, management.azure.com is coming back as a bad request. And that's probably because actually I meant to post some data to it rather than do a GET request. So if I wanted to maybe try this out without that item in the list, so let's say I just want to remove that item from the list, I could go and stop the project, and I could go here and delete this. The other thing I could do is I could use the immediate window. So here I can type code as if I was writing on a command line or typing PowerShell or something. So if I just type in URLs, it's going to give me a list of all the URLs in the list. Excuse me. So let's say I just want to remove that last one. So I can do urls.remove, and I'll just type that in. So if I just put that in, so it's come back with a true. And here, if I just go to URLs again, you can see now there's only 13, and I can see that that one's removed. So I want to restart the debug session. So I could just go and stop and start, or I could press restart. But one thing I could do here is I can actually step backwards through the code. So this is quite a handy feature. So if you see here, if you hover over a line, what you can do is you can run execution to here, but I need to run it backwards. So if I press Control, that turns yellow. So now if I click on that, it's actually taken me back up to here. So I've still got 13 URLs because I didn't run that line there. And now hopefully it won't stop at the breakpoint because it's not checking management.azure.com. So I'll put a little breakpoint at line 22 when it completes. So if I just allow it to continue, so I'll just hit F5. Okay, so it didn't hit the breakpoint. So great. And if I wanted to check if the URLs are up, it's true. And if we just want to quickly look at the output, not really much output, but at least it's saying that it's true. So another neat little thing that you can do here is, so I've got no unit tests here. I can tell this because this line, I've got a unit test for it. It's not really doing much, but I've got a unit test and it's showing is covered by one test. So, yep, of course, I need to add some unit tests. Yep. But the good thing about live unit testing is that it's going to check my code even while I'm in a debug session. So if I just change this to false, it's going to check that line of code that I've changed and say that I'm now failing a test. And I can now click through and see. So if I just undo that, and you'll see that actually I can run the code as normal, as if magic. So live unit testing or any similar technology that you come across is a good one to learn and to understand. Oh, okay. So that's the end of those demos. Okay, so we'll just head back to the PowerPoint. Right. All right. So now that we've learned a whole ton of things about productivity and about how to code a bit faster, so how can we how can we practice? How can we get better at this? So there's a comment that I've come across in a book called Clean Coder, which is by Robert Martin. So he's quite clear in what he says. He doesn't really skirt around issues. Probably why he's written some great books out there. So what he's basically saying here is that some employers will buy you books and send you on training classes, etc. But don't expect that from your employer. He's saying it's okay for them to do that, but they're doing you a favor. So, and he says, okay, try not to think of this as your employer's responsibility to train you up. So, okay, he's saying this about some other employers. So at Vanquish, we're definitely encouraging people to spend time in personal development. So we've all got about 10% or so of time per sprint of personal development. So we're definitely encouraging people. But if you find that in any company that you work in that you don't have time to train yourself up, then I think that's where you perhaps, if you're really serious about it, probably need to dedicate some personal time to it. Okay, and there was this phrase that I quite liked. I was trying to find out who this quote is from, and it looks like it's from many people. Perhaps many people are just trying to, put their names on it. But it's the same in maybe battle, war, whatever it is. It's the same as in code. So if you're finding that you've done loads and loads of personal development in Azure Service Bus, or working with API management, or Terraform, or I don't know, Razor Pages, or whatever it is. When it comes to doing the actual work in the office or at home, so to speak, it's going to be a lot easier, and you probably find that you're a lot faster. And this is probably something that 10x developers would do. So if they're really fast at that piece of work, it's probably because they've done it before. And if they haven't done it at in the job, but there hasn't been that project, then they've probably figured out how to do it in their spare time. So when it comes to doing it, they're super fast. So that leads us on to training and practice. So like I was saying, yeah, personal development is absolutely key if you want to learn how to code faster and be more efficient. And you can make training fun. It doesn't have to be, creating, opening up accounts or opening up loans. You can always try and make a really pointless, useless app. I don't know, try and integrate with Lego robotics or something and try and drive a little car around your room, or whatever comes to your mind. I've put up some Roman numerals here because of the code katas. So code katas are something that you can search online. You'll find loads of code katas. So kata is, I think it might be a Japanese word, but I think it's around some of the martial arts where you keep practicing over and over to try and become better. So code kata is just practice. So yeah, like I was saying, so there's Roman numerals, which are good fun. There's Project Euler, which you can search up. And there's many other sites out there which will give you little coding challenges. And one thing that I find is when I don't have that much energy to write code, or maybe read a book, some of the, we call them spoon feeding sort of training platforms. Things like Pluralsight are brilliant, and at Vanquish we do give people Pluralsight licenses, anyone in engineering. So that's an unlimited license. They can just listen or watch some sessions as they please. But also there's loads of online conferences out there. So there's NBC, there's GoTo, so there's many on YouTube, which are all free. It's cool. Another interesting thing is your Google search history. So I found that if I look through my search history, it tells me all the things I don't know. So if I'm always Googling about, I don't know, span of T or high performance development, then it's probably about time that I did a proper course on it or read a book on it. And I was just mentioning about making useless apps. So that's training and practice. So in summary then, so what have we covered? So we talked about productivity tips. So these are things like removing distractions, being intentional. So that's focusing on what you want to achieve for the day rather than letting your day run your day. We looked at automating yourself. So this is all the little PowerShell scripts and the other things that you can put into your work practice. We then went through some of the little neat tips and tricks that you can do in terms of how you develop. So it might be TDD with live unit testing or some other equivalent for the non-Visual Studio users. Debugging tips, which are pretty, those features are pretty common. So it's likely that many IDEs have that. And then learning keyboard shortcuts, just to shave off a few seconds here and there. It all adds up in the end. And then, as we were just talking about, how do we get better? How do we get faster, etc.? So lots of training and practice. Go-katters, making useless apps just for fun, etc. Okay, so some resources that I used to prepare this talk. So there are many different conferences and lectures on the topic. So here are some examples. There's there's go-to talks from about efficient developers. There's talk about thinking fast and slow, which I was mentioning. That's using your subconscious mind. And there's a number of books out there by Robert Martin and some health books and focus books. And you've got all the all those conferences, NDC, GoTo, and Devternity, etc. And Limitless, this film, you probably won't learn much development skills from it, but it's just a cool film that was, I don't know, just made me think of what, what potentials we haven't unlocked. So it's just a good film. I probably wouldn't watch it on work time though. Okay, so what I'll leave you with is these quotes. So challenge to yourselves for the day or for the evening. So have a little think about, where are we doing too much work? So what we don't want to be is actually lazy, but want to be lazy in a clever way, where actually we'll choose the lazy way to do all the work and to do it faster and to the same level of quality. So there's Lekwa Lisa, I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but he is he's one of the presidents of Poland, or he was in the 90s. He's also won the Nobel Peace Prize. So he's mentioned that, okay, it's the lazy people who invented the wheel because they didn't want to walk or carry things. So those people are fairly important. And, we've got this great quote from Bill Gates. He's always going to try and find a lazy person to do a hard job. So find an easy way to do it. So yeah, challenge to you guys is, where can you be lazy and still achieve everything you need to achieve? So thank you very much. I will just dropping a small hint. So we're hiring at Vanquish. If you want to head to vanquishcareers.co.uk, you'll find a whole list of job roles. So we've got everything from software engineer, data engineer, principal software engineer, etc. We're doing loads of work with Kubernetes, .NET, lots of cool Azure technologies, etc. So any questions? Okay, so I see a few questions here. So okay, do you think 10x developing can work in any language? So the 10x developer, yep, surely can. I'm not sure if I've answered this already during the talk, but yeah, it's just being able to work at much faster pace. So it could be, whether you're doing Python, it could even be, you do more infrastructure code. So Terraform or Pulumi or ARM templates, etc. So it definitely can work with any language. Do you think COVID remoting has impacted 10x developing? I think that's a great question. So it's probably helped in some cases and probably not helped in others. So it depends on what your remote working environment's like. So if you don't have much distraction at work, then actually, if you don't have much distraction at home, then actually it's probably quieter than the office, especially if you've got an open plan office. So perhaps you can focus better. But if you've then got loads of extra calls, which might be the case, then perhaps not. But it just depends on the working environment. But ideally, what you want to do is try and make your working environment peaceful, quiet, somewhere where you can concentrate. So I think perhaps I would say that working from home helps me work faster and pay more attention and concentrate better. That's just because I've got it's quite a quiet place where I live. Okay, what's the main value of being a 10x developer? Okay, so with businesses nowadays, everyone is trying to to outcompete their competitors, to outperform their competitors. So we all need to be able to deliver to market or to get a feature to market quicker. And there's no too early about it. You always have to get it out yesterday. So developers who can work really fast are very valuable to businesses, and that's any sector. But also to yourself, if you can, for the individual. So if we can work faster and get all our work done within the standard 9 to 5 or even 9 to 4, maybe that extra time you might be able to pick up some other tasks for your employer and add value in other ways. Maybe you can enter some strategy meetings, or maybe find something to innovate on and automate something else, some other part of your job, or automate some other processes that you can do. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that there are.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. I think that's all we have time for today. A big thank you to everyone that has joined us. And yes, Mark, thank you so much for sharing those insights and lots of useful information that I think is transferable in any role. So I really, really appreciate your time with us today.
Great. Thank you. Thanks
Great.
all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.